We'd like to begin this podcast by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. It is episode 19 of Talking Couch Potatoes. Howdy Mel, how are you?
Good.
That is good to hear. We're still missing our beautiful, wonderful, talented producer Jem. Hi Jem, hope everything's going well.
Yep. Hi Jem, we miss you.
We miss you. Although it is nice to get some alone time with you, Mel. You know, we've got a love-hate relationship. I love Mel. She hates me. Yeah. Last week's was pretty good.
Yeah. A bit dry again. We know that, and some people don't want to listen to, these sorts of topics, but it's important that our listeners understand the whole picture. It's not just about one aspect.
There's so many angles, isn't there?
Yeah.
And Jackson gave us a really acute look at the wagering income, the betting, how the government is tied in with that. The welfare is another angle. The social license is another angle. So we're going to attack it from every angle.
Absolutely. Well, I think we also want to make people aware that we're not just doing this because, as we've been accused of, is a bunch of,
bleeding hearts.
Yeah, wokey people that have smoked dope and sit under trees and,
I did that
don't
this
wear
morning.
Shoes.
Funny enough. I put some shoes on though.
We're not that. We're actually really trying to do whatever we can to have proof, to understand and to educate ourselves. And that's been Free the Hound's strong position from the very beginning.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense anymore. If you're a pro racer or you reckon we've got some stuff wrong, you could email us, podcast@freethehounds.com.au. We'd love to engage in a conversation. If you're brave enough, come on the show.
And as I said, I've reached out to Racing and Wagering WA to ask if their integrity manager would come onto the podcast and have a chat, and I haven't heard a word back.
Yeah, anyone from the government, in the government system as well, if you want to, you can phone in. Don't have to come and sit with us pot-smoking tree huggers in person. You could just phone in if you like. We really want to have a conversation, an honest dialogue. You know what our position is. Come and give us your position and we'll see if we can work out what's going on. Speaking of positions, one of our big positions is the petition, the 2024 petition. It's a awesome petition. You should go check it out if you want to do a deep dive into it. Obviously, episode 13, we tell you all about it. Or you could just do the simple thing and sign it.
Absolutely. And just sort of leading on from that, if you go to our website, you will find the petition, but also you will find a lot of other information about what we are doing, what we have discovered, different information about the industry, our economic view on the situation. There's injury data on greyhounds there. There's all of the race reports. There's footage of the races that the dogs have been injured in. There's a lot of information on there, and so I really encourage people to have a look at that.
freethehounds.com.au.
Yeah, it'll enable you to advocate more.
Yep.
And hopefully feel more passionate about what we're doing and what you can do to help us or to help the greyhounds.
It's a very thorough and very comprehensive and also very user-friendly, I find. It's really well designed.
Yeah.
You don't have to sort of rabbit around trying to find things. It's easily accessible. So, yeah, check it out.
Yeah. And, of course, you can find all the podcasts on there.
Podcasts. That's probably the primary thing you should be looking for. But if you're listening, then you're already a member of the crew. As I mentioned last time, we're a member of a community that spans 20 countries worldwide. So hello to everyone and our recent listeners. Poland have jumped on board.
It's summer there, isn't it? I don't know how cold it gets in summer in Poland, but our merch is also on our website.
Oh, cool. What do you got?
So
what kind of stuff?
All our hoodies and jumpers are back in stock now.
Hoodies, jumpers, caps. Yep. Can you get caps?
Yep, beanies, drink bottles,
stickers.
Cups.
Can you get stickers?
No, well, if you want a sticker, actually, we've been sending them out to people. So feel free to drop us an email at podcast@freethehounds.com.au and we can send you a sticker. But yeah, because I think if you're wearing a logo, Free the Hounds, it can open up conversations and discussions to be had.
Right.
So, and conversely to what the pro racers say, that we're a not-for-profit and yet here we are making profit selling T-shirts. A not-for-profit doesn't mean that you don't make a profit. It means that you don't keep the profit personally. which
Right.
we don't. Every cent goes back into it, and we don't make a big profit on anything we do.
Right. We're trying to sustain Free the Hounds so that it can
Yep.
do more advocacy.
Absolutely.
No one's making a quid out of it.
Absolutely. And this is our second year of running billboards. So we've got another new billboard coming out in July. So that's 4 billboards we've done. We've done commercial radio advertising. We've done a lot of printing. We're in the process of putting together a documentary. There's a lot of stuff that we do.
And we all do this podcast out of the love of our hearts. None of us receive any remuneration whatsoever.
Not at all.
My reward is the valuable quality time I get to spend with you, Mel. I mean, that's priceless. Coming up on this one, everyone, we're going to talk to Elle, who is part of the Greyhound Welfare Initiative in South Australia, and she's going to help us understand recent reports that have come out.
Yeah, well, the big greyhound inquiry down there after those horrific videos, and that came out late last year.
That was a hard watch. I believe in bearing witness.
Yep.
I don't think we should turn our eyes away. So if you have the stomach for it, there's some shocking stuff out there about how these beautiful creatures are treated.
Yep.
So I look forward to talking to Elle, who knows a lot more than I do about this stuff. So stay tuned for that.
Okie doke.
All right.
Let's get with it.
Alrighty, Mel, it's time now to talk to our wonderful special guest who's put some time aside today, Elle, who is president of the Greyhound Welfare Initiative. That's an advocacy group in South Australia. Elle, hi, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Elle, thanks for your time today. I know besides being a big activist in the space, which you've entered in the last sort of couple of years, you're also a greyhound mummy, I believe.
Yeah, I've got 2 fur kids. I got Maggie and Fergie. Maggie was my firstborn, and then Fergie joined the pack shortly after her because I became addicted, as many people do. When they get one greyhound, they need another.
It's a thing, isn't it? It's a thing. I think I've spoken.
It's a disease.
I've spoken before. I was sort of like confused about greyhounds initially when Jem wanted one. I said, "What are you talking about? They're scrawny-looking things made for racing." And, now it's just cancel the other breeds for me, really.
Oh, that's it. You're infected. You get it.
Elle, I wanted to talk a fair bit today about the South Australian government inquiry. Before we do that, what inspired you to get involved in greyhound advocacy? I'm guessing your baby greyhounds would have inspired that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. You're right. It was my baby girl who I knew nothing about greyhounds up until the end of 2020. Like you, saw them on the street, thought they were weird, lanky things, and then felt really passionate about rescuing an animal. So I just Googled first when it came up with greyhounds. I thought, oh yeah, I'll give it a whirl. And really naively entered into this space and opted to adopt my first girl, Maggie. And I mean, I was just consulted straight away, but then also was made very aware of some of the trauma I guess she'd been through a bit of a reverse learning process. And adopted her through greyhounds as pets because in South Australia, we don't have any community rehoming groups for rescue greyhounds. There's only the industry rehoming program.
Oh, wow.
And I found I was trying to reach out to people in my local community because none of my friends or family had greyhounds. And obviously I was very green in the space to build a bit of a community because I found Maggie was quite traumatized. She had a lot of all the typical sort of greyhoundy things that can happen when they've lived in that horrible environment for a long time. So I actually couldn't find really anyone. And the people I was speaking to were really from a pro-racing narrative and not really understanding where I was coming from. I went looking deep and I found the main providers of the support were a Facebook group here run by people who were in the industry. So putting out a lot of the propaganda, I guess, to support their cause. Stop finding absolutely no one here. I said, sod it. I'm going to start my own group.
Wow.
Because I know there are people out there who think like me. I can't be alone. I know they exist in other jurisdictions. So I just went, no,
Wow.
I'm going to start it. And it was just grew organically, to be honest.
That's amazing. You've seen a gap. You've seen a possibility of things falling through the cracks and you've decided to fill it yourself.
Pretty much. It's very in line with just if I see something and a bit of a strong sense of justice in myself as a character. And I thought, no, this isn't right.
Well done. So you'd know a fair bit, I guess, by now about what's going on with the greyhound industry. This idea that actually it's not not necessarily an industry as such, because it's very niche and it's sort of very condensed and controlled by small numbers, certainly in WA. Can you give us a sense of your sense of how it functions in South Australia?
Yeah. So pre 2000, there was a Racing Act. So sort of similar to other states that has their own legislation that I guess governs racing. In 2000, the Racing Act was repealed and racing was moved under another piece of legislation, the Authorised Betting Operations Act. So really the regulatory framework which sat over the top of greyhound racing as a code was this Authorised Betting Operation Act. And that legislation still exists today and is under the purview of the Minister for Consumer and Business Affairs.
Right.
So greyhound racing is actually here to say is actually a not-for-profit company. So it functions in a true sense for not-for-profit. So I think it's really important to note at this point that we don't have any legislation other than this Authorised Betting Operations Act and the Corporations Act, which are both one focused on gambling regulation and the other one's focused on business regulation. There is absolutely no legislation to govern the actual racing.
Why? So what I'm hearing is it's a bit of a sort of a Wild West. The cowboys are running the saloon kind of situation. It doesn't sound like,
Absolutely.
and that doesn't sound like a great recipe to keep an eye on welfare issues, to keep an eye on.
No.
Right, and that sounds quite quite different from the WA experience here, where the government is so intertwined in I guess more harmful ways as well.
Yeah, so we have a racing minister, but I guess the ironic thing is she's got influence, obviously, as the government figure does, but in terms of actually being able to do anything, she can't. There's no legislation to support anything. So yeah, as the last basically 24 years, Greyhound Racing SA has been operating as a self-regulatory business model.
Wow.
And I mean, yeah, what could go wrong? Letting a business, so you've got interest in profiteering of animals, regulate their welfare and
keep an eye on themselves.
Yeah. So can I just ask, what welfare then, what regulatory welfare do greyhounds sit under?
So the regulatory, they should be under the Animal Welfare Act, but Greyhound Racing SA has part of their controlling function. They oversee the welfare as well. So really, they're dealing with things in-house, which means they have their own internal hearing panels, their own integrity section. So look, it's a huge conflict of interest, and that's one of the huge issues, which I think has obviously led us to where we're at today with huge exposés on the media and various things like that, because they've proven time and time again that self-regulatory business model is ineffective, and it just is at the detriment of the greyhounds every single time.
Well, because that's the same as the welfare sits in WA, but the issue that we have here, I guess, is the fact that the government can do something but won't.
I guess there's that tension there, isn't there? If you've got a situation where you've got these creatures that are being viewed as commodities effectively, then you've got the welfare concerns alongside that, ensuring safety. Where safety and welfare gets in the way of maximising the returns of a commodity, it sounds like you wouldn't want the same person managing both of those issues.
Yeah, you're right. And I think the recent inquiry in South Australia produced a report. And I think the report highlights that really well, that, pretty much since the corporatisation in 2000, that there has been people making decisions in the capacity of having dual roles in profiteering off animals and also decisions about their welfare. And it's been evidenced through case studies in the report that it has been at the detriment in the lives of these greyhounds. So it's sad when you dive into it and can see that the current legislative framework is completely unsupportive of any kind of changing that structure as it is. So, yeah.
Part of the report I read, Elle, which stood out to me quite a bit, there's a big argument made from pro racers, people who want to support this industry, that it forms a bit of a cultural or a societal function as being sort of a place for social gathering. It's a community sort of way to get together. The reports indicates that that's shifted dramatically, and actually it doesn't really perform that function so much anymore, given the, I believe, multiple races that have to be aligned when they can be televised for the tab. Every 20 minutes, people tend to just turn up, do the races and nick off. It doesn't really perform that social function anymore.
Yeah, that's correct. It's exactly right. And since the industry was corporatised in 2000, saw the die-off of, these country clubs and regional tracks where I guess what you're alluding to, that culture was more prevalent. But yeah, the way that betting has gone too, moving more into that online format. And I guess the biggest thing is that society has evolved and that the whole landscape of the business of greyhound racing has changed, that it's really only suiting the needs of, scheduling races to when corporate bookmakers, the TOB, can have these races, and it is not really structured anymore around this community vibe, which the report also just said it's absolutely not the case and called for more to be done, one of the recommendations. But I think that we have to be realistic here, that I think society has changed, and I don't see that really changing the social, cultural function of greyhound racing, including getting back together in the wild.
Yeah, and having a powwow at the track. It's just
Yeah, I think we're done with that.
Yep. They should come and join the activists under the tree and smoke some joints.
Apparently that's
what we all
great.
do.
Yeah,
yes, that suit them much better anyway, I reckon.
we're hugging trees and getting high, apparently. Talking Couch Potatoes does not condone the use of any illegal substances, by the way, kids.
Absolutely not.
What we do try and condone is bringing to awareness, shining a light on what's actually happening. I've been really surprised, similar to you, Elle, only moved into the space in the last couple of years since being a greyhound daddy, but I've been really surprised at the level of ignorance, I guess, and not maliciously ignorant, just genuinely unaware that the general public has that the greyhound racing is still going on, let alone the level of carnage and injury. So we're trying to really shine a light on all of this stuff, because most people, in my experience, once they understand what's happening, they're actually quite surprised and quite willing in supporting us in some way. I guess what saddens me a little bit, we saw the recent footage that came out. My stomach turned as I watched it, as I bore witness to that. I guess my question is, why does it seem to take these sort of real extreme events, the worst of the worst, before the public gets activated in some way?
Yeah, so you raised a good point. I think primarily the same thing happens with me. I think the general public are not thinking about greyhound racing unless they're hunting or somehow involved. It's not on your radar. There's a general shock that it even still exists. I've definitely felt that. I think the best way, and I was thinking, we need to probably be real here, that the betting on greyhound racing does provide the state government with significant taxation revenue, and the betting operations tax, which does cover all forms of racing, brought in an estimated $82 million. Oh, that's my dog growling. Hey, stop it.
Hey, Maggie. Is that Maggie?
No, that's Fergie, because I'm on the bed and he's cuddling me and Maggie's circling. Don't do that. Okay,
Hi,
sorry.
Fergie.
Cheeky boy, what are you doing? Okay, sorry, back to my answer. So yeah, betting on greyhound racing provides significant taxation revenue to the state government, $82 million to the government in 2022-23. And also our state government did welcome and increase support for racing in the last state budget by doubling the industry share of returns from the betting operation tax. And obviously what I'd mentioned before around the legislative framework is really geared around profiteering from the gambling side, and the government really is concerned with that. When footage like the horrific footage of the abuse came to light, it did capture the widespread attention and generate significant outrage, because animal welfare, it is actually important to the community. I think it takes a huge expose like this to happen, and people are really, really pissed off because of the suffering inflicted on the greyhounds. I think that the politicians, I don't want to say always, but often respond to things like this because of public pressure. And when their own interests are at stake. The abuse of the greyhounds was a high-profile incident because it was South Australia's top greyhound trainer. And I think it put immense political pressure on the government to do something. And because if they didn't address this huge issue. It could damage their reputation. And I guess essentially the bottom line is jeopardise their chances of re-election. I think that it's important to note that greyhound racing was not on this government's agenda. It hasn't been for 24 years.
Well done for getting it on their agenda. Well done for shining a light on that. And you mentioned this was the argument I hear sometimes is that greyhound racers love their animals. The greyhounds love to run, and there's just a couple of bad apples. We're talking about the top trainer in South Australia on this footage. So I'd question whether it's just a couple of bad apples. If this is representative, if this is what the top trainer's up to, this kind of abuse, could we just take a guess that it's a bit more endemic in the industry than they're willing to sort of let on?
Yeah, and I think that inquiry report very clearly says that there's a massive gap between the reality of what is going on and the perception that the community holds, and that gap is continuing to widen. So, yeah, and I think that's foolish to say it's a couple bad apples when really now that this evidence report would pretty much state that it's not just a few bad apples, it's endemic to the industry and how it operates and the way it functions.
And one of the things from the report that I was quite surprised by, one of the things that is basically an industry standard I wasn't aware of is that they get these gorgeous creatures apparently get 30 minutes outside of their kennels every day. That's it. 30 minutes of fresh air and then it's back inside. And that is considered a normal practice.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, if that, who's overseeing that? Who's regulating it? These are the same people who are wanting these animals, exploiting these animals to make money for them. So where's their moral compass at?
Yeah.
I mean, best case scenario, they're getting 30 minutes. That's if they even leave their kennel when it's open. Now, it's just barbaric to me. It's never treat an animal like that.
And if you're listening and you don't have a greyhound, if you have like a border collie, you've got a Labrador, whatever your breed of dog you love, could you imagine having it sitting in a dark kennel for 23 and a half hours? Would you do that to your beloved companion? It just boggles my brain. Elle, your Premier in South Australia seemed to move quite swiftly to begin this inquiry. How did you find the results of the report, how it was presented by Graham Ashton?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that the report had covered so many of the issues that I guess were highlighted with the Commissioner during the consultation process. I guess my first comments are I found it pretty profound, and I was very impressed that they included so many of the case studies at the back of the report. I think that the statement the government said was essentially greyhound racing has 2 years to clean up its act or face the risk of no longer operating in South Australia. And I guess the upshot was that the report found it's documented in there, like entrenched systemic welfare problems endemic to the industry. And there's so much evidence in there to substantiate those claims. So I think it was a good step in the right direction. And then the 86 recommendations in there that in principle the government accepted pretty much on the spot.
Yep.
Was a good sign and good step in the right direction. And that was in December in 2023. That came out.
So it sounds like Greyhound Welfare Initiative are fairly welcoming of the report and the recommendations. Was there anything in there that was a bit of a disappointment for you or that you feel like it missed?
Yeah, I guess the main disappointment for me was there's so much of the report was just around reforming the gambling side of the industry. I mean, obviously they're going to look at that too, but I think given the weight of the endemic welfare issues, reading that report, I thought there was just way too much emphasis on continuing the gambling landscape. And I also really was disappointed that the Premier made comments that the government wants to see the greyhound racing industry survive,
right? But
only if it cleans up its act. And I also found the assumption that the industry has a social license, and that was up until even when the report was handed over around comments around continuing its social license. I think were really disappointing because there's no way you could read that report, see those photos in there and really think this is something that has a social license. And then the biggest disappointment for me that's come to light is there was a recommendation in the report around them appointing an inspector to oversee the reform and the implementation of the recommendations. And that 2-year period starts from the appointment of the inspector.
And that's, I'll jump in, that's Sal Perner has been appointed to oversee the implementation of reforms. I was going to ask you, Elle, what's your position on that?
Yeah, so he actually isn't going to be starting till later in the year, which is very disappointing. I think we're behind now on the appointment timeframe, which was Easter. Look, my comment on that Sal's background is after 10 years working in Victoria Racing Integrity Commission.
Yep.
Racing commissions have been around for a long time. They cost the taxpayers substantial money. They do not effect change in the industry. It's founded on the exploitation of animals. Sal's background is in integrity, which the concern there is integrity is around the continuation of the industry's gambling landscape and making sure that it's a competitive industry and one that's fair for punters. And he said a comment in the media this week that integrity is critical to success in racing. Without integrity, the industry's reputation is damaged. People won't bet and the stakeholders lose confidence.
Right. So the premise there is, how do we do enough so that we can continue, to get some wagering revenue from this, not how do we sort of reform it in terms of welfare?
That's correct, yeah. And I think they probably think they've got a fair crack at being able to police integrity, like race fixing, perhaps some doping, the conduct of racing participants, but they have nothing to do with welfare. Welfare is a moral issue. And the fact of the matter is the gap between the current state of greyhound racing and the expectation of the community is great, and it's only increasing. And I don't see any evidence from Mr. Perner's previous work in the commission in GRV improving anything for greyhound welfare in his time. But I will say I look forward to meeting him. I'm hopeful he will want to meet with stakeholders that are outside the remit of the pro racing enthusiasts. I always like to meet people, consult with them, and I'm really happy to engage with him. So I'm really hoping that we can find a balance of information sharing in this period above everything else.
Yep. Just on that point, you talk about the potential way to have any kind of integrity in the industry. The report itself, a little section stood out to me where they talk about the aggregation of greyhounds among too few participants, which has led to these trainers having a position to exert significant influence on the industry, and the industry is dependent on these trainers to supply greyhounds for races. So it seems this then, places pressure on the industry when interacting. So it seems like, once again, there's a bit of a conflict of interest there in policing themselves when you've got such powerful sort of trainers that hold a large part of the industry.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's getting more so with a small handful of trainers holding the monopoly of the industry, and trainers that have repeated doping swabs. There's all sorts of things going on, but they're just unpoliceable because they hold the power and they're keeping the industry going essentially. Without them, there would be no industry that would return to its former hobbyist state.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the exact same thing here. You've got a handful. They get charged with doping, but you know very well that they're not going to remove them because they can't, because they've got the best dogs, the fastest dogs. They bring in the most revenue to racing. There are other smaller hobbyist trainers that they get really annoyed at it too, because it's like, why do these people keep getting away with it?
Right.
That's often the main bugbear, that these top trainers are getting away with the doping and getting away with anything. But the reality is that it's never going to stop because they're needed to keep the industry going.
I mean, the report, quite blatantly, there's one sentence here that stood out to me. You mentioned race fixing. They've just written, currently the industry does not have a capability to investigate race fixing to an adequate level to address this risk. So they've put it in black and white in their own report, and yet trying to argue a case that we want to continue gaining gambling revenue from an industry they've explicitly said cannot police or, manage race fixing. It just boggles the brain a little bit. Elle, I wanted to wrap this up. First of all, I'm guessing that, like Free the Hounds, your group's ultimate aim would be the eradication of greyhound racing in general?
Oh, absolutely. It's totally at the end of it. And along that journey, it's educating the the community, the government, smarter ways to reinvest back into the community, things that benefit the whole community to transition to the end of the industry. So it's, we have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram, we're a diverse group of people. A lot of us work full-time, a lot of us don't. If you're interested in any part of what I said, or you want to get involved, or you don't know how to get involved and you want some information, just drop us a message, follow our page. We're always keen to have a chat, and we can only do what we can do with all the good people behind us. So always looking for motivated people who are just willing to run with us.
I think you're doing amazing work. And to all of our listeners, we've got, listeners in 20 countries around the world, Elle, but we've also got listeners in every state of Australia as well. So if you're in South Australia, or you can also help in an online sort of way as well. So wherever you are, check it out, the Greyhound Welfare Initiative. You can Google that, you can check out the website, the socials, and you'd be more than willing to have people sort of get in touch and see how they can help out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elle. This was really informative. Mel, did you have any sort of burning questions left for Elle before we wrap it up?
Just that so well done on all the work you've done, Elle. What a dynamic group you've become in such a short amount of time. It's been so good to witness. And it's us smaller states have to stick together.
The more
after each other.
And the more we link in. Thanks for linking in with Free the Hounds. Also, I guess if you're listening out there and like Elle, you've just become a greyhound mummy or daddy, or you've just become aware of the issues and you want to get something started at the roots, you can get in touch with us or get in touch with Greyhound Welfare Initiative. And the more we link in together, the stronger we'll become.
Absolutely. Well, Elle was with us in Victoria or Melbourne when we went at the workshop. So it was
right. Not long ago.
Yeah, it was the first time we'd met in person. So it was
awesome.
great. Yeah. Coming together like nationally now that we are in touch so often, it's really sort of helped me personally. I feel like there's been a bit of a boost, a bit of a lift.
Yeah, definitely. Really, you feel connected. There's so many like-minded people out there, and I definitely feel really supported in this space, knowing other people in other jurisdictions are hustling just as hard, and we're trying to make good strides and achieving good things. It's really motivating.
Absolutely, because it can be pretty lonely, especially when, some of the things that you get called or told that you're doing and all the rest of it, when at the end of the day, it's really just about caring about the animals.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. It's just caring and wanting more for these animals. And then I guess the hunger and the desire to just see the end of this torture for them. And I'm so determined and so hopeful that the end is in sight. It keeps me going.
Yeah, same.
Same here. Thank you so much, Elle. Thanks for being a voice for the voiceless. And come and chat to us again sometime.
Will do. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Elle.
Thank you. Bye.
How awesome was that, Mel?
I know. I really like Elle and love the work that they're doing in South Australia.
She's so inspiring.
Yeah.
And only the last couple of years since getting her babies, and just saw, this state of South Australia having no guardrails whatsoever.
I know.
Having the old, what's that saying, the fox guarding the hen house? How much of a example of that? And she's gone, well, I'm going to have to be, I'm going to have to guard the fox then.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
She's stepped up and she's doing it.
Good on her, hey?
Awesome, Elle. You're amazing, Elle. We love you at Free the Hounds and we love you at the podcast. Come and see us again sometime. Speaking of the podcast, Mel, we've got a little break coming up, haven't we?
We have a hiatus.
A hiatus. We don't have many hiatuses. Hiati? Hiati is the plural, I think.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We're making shit up as we go along.
Well, we got to take a little break because everyone needs a bit of breathing space. So the next one we're back on will be the 5th of July. It's only a little break.
Yeah, yep.
But we'd love you to email us, podcast@freethehounds.com.au, especially if you've got any ideas about what you'd like to hear on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you're loving hearing.
Yep.
Maybe what you're not loving so much.
And just before we do get back, I believe there may be a new billboard up in Subiaco.
Ooh.
So have a look.
Okay.
It's right around that time. I'll remind you again on the 5th, of course. But
is it going to be dusting again?
It's actually not.
Have we got a new poster posted?
Yeah, well, they're not a petition dog, but I'll talk more about it on the 5th.
Ooh, you're being very cryptic and mysterious now. We'll have to wait to hear about it. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this podcast with the aim of bringing to an end what is an outdated, unsustainable, inhumane so-called sport. please keep listening. Please keep joining in the conversation. Please keep advocating, because our aim is to eventually, Mel, release the hounds.